Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys already know it is a Monday, and we are bringing some amazing conversations with some more amazing people for you guys. Now, before we get started, if you guys didn't check out the intro, this is going to be for educational purposes only. And as always, if you guys haven't already, do me a favor, head over to their YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you guys be notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, my next guest, she is amazing, and we've had a great conversation. I think you guys are going to be impressed, and you guys are going to learn a lot as well. So, if you guys are dealing with narcissistic abuse or in a narcissistic relationship, maybe you aren't aware, but you do have options. Today, we have an expert on this very matter. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring up my next guest, and guys, if you guys have any questions or comments, do me a favor, put them in the comment section, and we will get to them as we go along. Ronia.
Hi, Tony.
How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you in. So ever since the first time that we had that conversation, I was like, man, she's talking to me. She's talking to me what I've been going through. you know, and it's such a crazy topic when we talk about narcissists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have some experience. But before we get started, introduce yourself and tell people where you're from.
Sure. My name is Ronia Fraser, and I'm a multi-award winning trauma recovery coach and clinical hypnotherapist, and I'm one of the leading experts in the field of narcissistic abuse recovery, which means I work with abuse survivors from all over the world, and I help them get back on their feet, regain their mental health, and recover who they were always meant to be in the process. And where I'm from, actually, it's not a simple question. Originally, I'm from Germany, but I left like 20 years ago, so I'm not sure if I still qualify as a German. So I spent some time in the UK, spent some time in the US. Right now, I'm in Lisbon, Portugal.
Oh, wow. Now, see, how's the weather out there?
It's getting better. So as you can see, I'm sitting here in my tank top. So that's an improvement because Portugal is surprisingly cold in the winter.
Is it really? I would think that it would be a lot warmer there.
Well, outside is cold. Outside is warm. Outside is mild, but the houses have no heating. They have no insulation. Mm-hmm. So you literally sit here in your thermal. So I'm really happy that we are on the way out or into the spring. So yeah.
Okay, I definitely like that idea. We're doing the same thing here. We just got done doing a huge old snowstorm out here, and I'm not okay with it. But it's it's going to be okay. I'm a tropical person. I like some heat. So I'm kind of really excited for the spring. So now we talked a little bit. You got an amazing story about. So let's get into the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Who you were. And how did you get into this field of helping others going through narcissistic abuse and becoming a trauma recovery coach?
Yeah, so obviously it's such a specific work environment, like topic. So needless to say, I'm a survivor of narcissistic abuse myself. You don't just end up working in this line of field unless it has happened to you. Right. And a few years ago, and I was living in the US at that time, I was living in LA, I got involved with the wrong man again. And which I actually didn't know at the time, but there was a realization I had later on that it actually wasn't the first time, it was just the worst time. And that time, it literally cost me everything. I lost my job, I lost my house, I lost my health, I lost myself, and I almost lost my life. And as a consequence, obviously, clearly, I was very much struggling with my mental health. But back then, I didn't even realize that I was being abused. I thought I was the problem because, LA, and I just thought after all those years, Hollywood had gotten to me anyway. And I just became one of LA's fallen angels, right? I mean, that's what LA is famous for. Yeah. And I thought I was the problem. Turns out, of course, I wasn't. And at that time, however, I didn't even realize, right? So I looked at myself and what was wrong, what I did wrong. And when I was really struggling with my mental health, it was something that was new to me at the time. And I knew that something had happened to me, but I didn't know what it had been. Right. And I was looking for help. I would religiously go to therapy every week. I wanted to get better. And I was committed to make that happen, but it just didn't. So I would go to therapy week after week after week. And in the meantime, I was learning about narcissistic abuse, which was a little bit more challenging back then because it didn't really exist, not like it does now. And it was literally like putting a puzzle piece, like the puzzle pieces together. And I gained a lot of knowledge and understanding of what had happened to me. But despite all of my in-depth knowledge, I wasn't feeling any better. And I mean, if you're anything like me, if you put your time, your effort, your money, your tears into something, you want to see results, right? And I would go to therapy every week. Nothing would ever change. And I got really frustrated with that. And when I raised it with my therapist, who was absolutely lovely, and I was really glad I had her in my corner because she was pretty much the only person in my corner. She just didn't have the tools that I needed at the time. So she said to me, well, you know, this is just how it is now. This is your life, and it's something you need to accept, and we will need to find ways to manage this. And I said, no, I cannot accept this, because I was at a point in my life where I couldn't have promised you I'd still be alive the next day. Right. And that's not a life worth living. It's literally no quality of life. And I was like, no, there's no way in the world I can accept this. And I know something had happened to me. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that something had happened that turned me into this mess. So I went on this mission, like literal mission, where I was like, there's gotta be something that can reverse the damage as effectively as it was caused. Because clearly something that happened. And I think because I was actually at that point in my life where I had nothing left to lose, it's what allowed me to actually go all in. And to tell you the truth, if I had died in the process of finding this something, I would have been okay with that. Mm. But of course, my motivation was to live. Right. And so I went out on my own and I just tried out different things. And the very interesting thing, I think, is once we reach a point like that in our lives, is your mind expands. You become open to new ideas, new ways of looking at things, because naturally, most of us are very logic people, very brainy people, but clearly everything that sort of made sense and was like theoretical and was brainy clearly didn't get me any results. So what happened, given the circumstances, is that my mind actually expanded to new ideas. And I really just went out and tried out various different things, you know, like breath work, went to acupuncture, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, hypnosis, havening techniques. There are so many beautiful modalities actually now available to work with trauma. And not everything worked for me, but some things worked. So I just really took what I was given to do what I needed to do. And while I was doing that, I was building my own toolbox. And once I discovered, it was by pure accident, I came across first coaching. Through coaching, I came across NLP. Through NLP, I came across hypnosis. And once I had actually put those puzzle pieces together and found the right blend for me, I was post-traumatic stress symptom free within 5 months. And because I know how you feel when you're literally written off, when you're told that you're a lost cause, that, you know, you are destined to lead a life of suffering, pretty much. I was like, no, this couldn't be further from the truth, which I believed right from the get-go. And that's how I then ended up doing what I do now, because it is such a fire in my belly, really. It's what gets me up in the morning, because the common narrative, even though it's become this big buzzword, narcissistic abuse, right? It hasn't changed. So survivors still go to doctors, to therapists, to coaches, and they're still being told that there is nothing you can do. And that's why I'm so passionate about my work, because clearly there is.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
how does a person, because we've talked about this, and being a male, it was something that I had to learn, right? Because I never knew what a narcissist was. I just thought, I just thought the person that I was with was just, I thought they were evil, right? Because of the things that they were doing. And it's kind of strange to admit, because I was in that abusive relationship, verbally and mentally. And then at some point she became physically abusive, and I was, being a male, you would think, what, got to punch her out. But I was raised different. I was like, my mom always said, you don't put your hands on a woman. And but there was times where she was pushing, and I was like, man, I just one, just come on, I just one across the face real quick.
Yeah.
But now I thought about it, and I was like, it's not even worth it anymore. Unfortunately, we had a son, and I found her using certain things against me. And again, I didn't know, right? And like yourself, I thought I was the problem. I thought I was the one that was doing these things, right? And it was kind of strange, because considering the background that I come from, being in the gangs, and surviving that, and all those different things, I was just like, well, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I still need to learn a few things, right? And some years later, I found out that it wasn't me, right? It was one of those, it's not me, it's you type thing.
Yeah.
But I still had to learn what a narcissist was. Now, I know every situation is different. I know every relationship, every narcissistic abusive relationship is different, but there are commonalities that are across the board.
Yeah.
Now, I pose the question to you, what are some of those commonalities? So those who may be in that sort of relationship may not even understand that the individual that they're with are a narcissist. What are some of the things that they can look out for that you've seen across the board that are solid?
Yeah. And actually, I just want to pick up on that, because I didn't know what a narcissist was either. None of us know what a narcissist is until it happens to us, because it's literally not on our radar. And because we are wired so differently, it would never occur to us that somebody else would treat someone else like that.
Right.
Whereas for them, it's just how it's how they are. And I mean, by now, as I already said, there is so much content online. And I mean, you can Google the red flags of a narcissist, and you get like all the lists. And one thing I think to keep in mind is there are so many different forms of narcissists. They come in so many different shades. Like, even if you study all of those, you can tick the boxes, and then you might have had an experience that ticks all of those boxes, but then you get involved with another narcissist who's a whole different shade of narcissism, and then you couldn't have known, right? Because you only were aware of one. So there are so many different signs, behaviors, all of that. But that's exactly why I think it's more important even. It's important to become aware, right? And do your research and everything. However, what happens very naturally is it's very easy to find excuses for other people's behaviors, right? Maybe they had a bad day at work, and that's why they're treating me that way. They are stressed, or something happened, or usually there is some sort of sob story to draw us in, and also to excuse certain behaviors. And we will very naturally do that, because when we get involved with a narcissist, that means that we are empath. We are very caring people. We love very deeply. And then, of course, when somebody, is struggling, what do we naturally do? We open our heart. We want to help them with all the love that we have to give. And I think what's really, really important, and to answer your question, is to explore what is going on for ourselves inside of us, because we can make excuses for everyone else. However, when we pay attention to what's happening for us, there is no excuse, because this is real. This is actually happening. And for example, one of the things that's a very high indication that you're dealing with a narcissist is that you're always walking on eggshells all the time. And the thing with narcissists is they have their mask, right? It goes on, it comes off, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Mrs. Hyde. You never know who you get. You don't even know how you tick them off. You cannot anticipate when the mask comes off. So naturally, we compromise on our wants, our needs, our values, just to keep that monster at bay, right? But in turn, what happens, because we're so not true to ourselves anymore, we are constantly feeling anxious, and it's literally like walking on eggshells around them. So if you are in a situation and you are actually, if you're questioning whether you're in a narcissistic relationship, you already know, because otherwise you wouldn't even ask yourself that question. But walking on eggshells, very, very high indication that you're dealing with a narcissist. What's also very common is that you look in the mirror and you don't recognize the person looking back at you. And some people don't actually see anything at all. And that's a high indication that there is a very tactical identity erosion that's taking place. And because when it happens to us, and we don't even realize what's happening to us, right? So one step after the other, we become less and less and less of who we thought we were. And I actually have this analogy, because obviously it's my job to explain something that makes no sense to people that haven't experienced it. So the analogy that I use for this identity erosion and how narcissistic abuse actually works is the game Jenga. Do you know the game Jenga?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
Yeah.
Very familiar.
And so the game Jenga, in case you don't know it, it's like this building, this tower, which consists of building blocks. And you basically, that's the game, you pull out one building block after the other, eventually the tower collapses and you lost. And narcissistic abuse actually works in exactly the same way, because we all have those building blocks that make up who we are. And that can literally be anything, right? It can be financial, it can be professional, it can be aspirational, it can be relational. We all have those building blocks. And then a narcissist comes in and then starts pulling out one building block after the other until literally our life comes crashing down. So what does a narcissist do? Plays Jenga with our reality. And sometimes they're actually so skilled that they will pull out your most fundamental building block straight away. And that's how you can find yourself in a situation, and that was the case with me as well, where I was highly functioning and literally overnight I was a complete mess. So, and you realize, obviously, because you're feeling extremely unwell, you don't understand what's happening. And it's literally like losing yourself. So when you look into the mirror, either you don't recognize the person looking back at you, or there is nobody there when you look in the mirror. So that's also an indication that you are dealing with a narcissist. And I know I've used those words, especially in the very beginning when I didn't know what I was dealing with and I didn't have the language to explain. I would say, I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel like an addict. Or I would say, he's my drug, he's my heroin. And that is actually something that everybody experiences. And that indicates that there is trauma bonding at play. And I do whole master classes just on that topic, because it's very interesting what happens in the brain. And that's also the reason why you cannot just walk away. And of course you have to, but that's the reason why it feels almost impossible, because part of that illusion is that we cannot survive without them, right? So walking on eggshells, not recognizing the person looking back at you in the mirror, feeling like an addict. And actually, one more thing that's very important. If you've ever said or thought, I think I'm going crazy, I think I'm losing my mind, maybe you've been called crazy, that's also an indication that you are dealing with a narcissist. That's an indication for gaslighting that's happening there. Because when we experience gaslighting, it's actually a form of mental torture where the abuser distorts the reality to such an extent that we, like, everything we seem to remember isn't true anymore. I mean, it is true, but they distort it so it doesn't seem like it. So you stop trusting yourself, and it literally feels like you're losing your mind. And then once you go like, oh my God, I think I'm going crazy, what will they do? They will jump on that straight away and reinforce that narrative of being crazy as a result, and with all the other manipulation and abuse techniques that are at play. As a result, we start acting crazy. Other people start seeing us as crazy, and that's how the crazy person becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And I love that you tapped into that, because when you were talking, I was thinking about the relationship I was in with my narcissist, and there was exactly what you said. I thought I was going crazy, right? And there was times where I would just sit back and go, you know what? I got to get out of this. I have to get out of this. And it was such a strategic move on her end, right? And that I didn't even know, right? Because when you're thinking about relationships, things like that, right? The natural order of things. You start dating with someone, you feel some sort of way about them. Maybe you have strong feelings towards them. But then, you tend to think about a future. You say, okay, let's see where this thing goes. You move in with one another, right? What I found was, and this is why I say it was so very strategic, and she eventually revealed it to me a little bit later down the line. She moved me away from everyone that I knew. Like, clear on the other end of Colorado. I used to live in Denver, and she lived in Loveland, and sure enough, she moved me from one end all the way down to the other end, away from everybody. I didn't think nothing else of it. She was pregnant at the moment, having a good understanding of, hormones and things like that. I associated with it could just be the hormones, right? And she became very abusive. The things that she would say, and I'll just look at her, I wouldn't say anything. And we was raising her other kid at the time. And I saw the game that she was playing with her. And so I would always, when her mom was at home, I would take her and go out and go play Frisbee, just to get her away from the household and things like that. Still never put two and two together. I just never did, right? I was just like, I was very naive. As street smart as I was not naive to that an individual could be like this. I met some really crazy individuals before, just never been in that sort of relationship. And then over a period of time, she had our son, and nothing changed. She got worse. Now, over that period of time, I left, and this is what she told me. She goes, "Where are you going to go? I've already moved you away from all your friends. You're stuck with me." I said, "I would rather be homeless than to be with you."
Yeah. Well, that indicates quite a lot of calculation right there.
Right. And I didn't understand how in depth, because when you live on the streets, you surviving on the streets, there's a strategic way that you learn how to move around in order to survive, right? Now, to have it done to you in a different way, you think to yourself, like, how in depth was this planned out? How in depth, right? And to think that someone can be that manipulative is a scary fact.
Yeah. And I think it's very, very important to understand that you literally couldn't have known, the same as I couldn't have known, the same as anybody couldn't have known. And when we heal from narcissistic abuse, what we deal with a lot, especially in the beginning, is anger, obviously towards them, but oftentimes also a lot of anger at ourselves, because we're smart people, right? We're brainy people. And what happens is that, and it literally happens to all of us, when we then start beating ourselves up because we should have known better, we should have seen it, maybe we did see it but we didn't leave, like all those kind of things. And for everybody who is in this situation right now, I just want to really point out that we all do the best we can with what we have at the time. You didn't know better. I didn't know better. Tony, you didn't know better. And as we go along, we gain new knowledge, we gain new tools. And that's actually what's helping us going forward to not repeat the same mistakes. But it's not our fault, because we couldn't have known. It's not your fault. You couldn't have known. Now you know. Now it's time, to take responsibility for yourself and your healing. And that whole concept of narcissistic abuse and narcissistic abuse recovery, there is literally nothing fair about it. But the reality of the matter is, it wasn't our fault. However, the healing now is our responsibility.
Right. And I think that I love that you said that right there as well, because the healing process, I think I went about it in a different way. And I think everybody does, and how they approach it. And, I associate it now with the work that I do, right? Because it helps me understand when I approach certain men, having been in that sort of relationship and having had to go through the process of rebuilding myself. I would say this, right? And this is not for everyone. This is just something that I come up with that worked for me. I started to laugh at it, because she became my best teacher, right? She became a really good teacher to me. Because for one, the thing when it comes down to certain people, ego, right? Your ego, your pride, and things like that will get in the way of you seeing certain things. Well, when that's already destroyed and you have to move those things out of the way, you now have to develop certain skills to bring out a different part of you. And what it did is that once it brought out those different parts of me, I began to laugh, because I was going, I don't need these things anymore. And I began to rebuild myself, because on the other end, we had a child. And I told myself, you know what? I need to become a better version of myself, so my son, our son, knows that he has one parent who is at least not crazy. I mean, I may be a little crazy, but not crazy like that, right? And to give him a fighting chance in the world to, you see this side over here, and now you can see this side over here. I'm gonna give you the option of choosing which one of these traits would you rather have going on through, to carry with you through your life. And then on top of there, the rebuilding of myself, right? A totally different person, because I had to learn how to forgive, right? And the reason being, she got me fired from 4 jobs. She got me evicted out of 2 places, and she got 2 of my vehicles repossessed. I was like, holy crap. Right? And so I laugh about it now, because I now find it funny that someone can go around and do something like that. But I'd also look at it and look at the people that she brought in and was able to manipulate and turn against me. And I just looked, and I was like, well, and after a while, I just went, I don't care. I really just don't care. If you're not going to come to me and give me the opportunity, the chance, so you can get to know who I am, then I don't care what you think about me. Because at the end of the day, I have to be a different person, a different male man for my son.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that mattered to me. So I guess that became my reason for going forward, and to teach my son that no matter what happens, you have to find it within yourself to forgive them, because they know not what they do, and you
Yeah.
cannot control what they do.
No, you
So
cannot.
you can
That's the thing,
control,
right? You can't
yeah,
control them, but what you can control is actually how you feel about it, how you
exactly.
respond to things. And as you said, all of a sudden, our biggest hardship becomes our biggest teacher. And it's such a
Yeah.
cliche thing to say, but it is actually true, because obviously when we find ourselves in those situations, that's what forces us to look at ourselves.
Mhm.
Whereas before we look at everything else, but not at ourselves. And especially with narcissistic abuse and always putting other people before our own, and the well-being of other people, things like that. So obviously when we then have something like that happen, your only choice is to start looking at yourself. And it's an invitation to weed out our own garden. And is it pleasant? No, it's absolutely
No.
not pleasant. However, what it will show you very quickly is how much power you actually hold over yourself, over your life. And that's how this actually becomes this blessing in disguise, right?
Yeah.
And you're a very different person how you used to be. My life couldn't be any more different to how it used to be and how it is now. But what also happens is when we then actually do our healing work and we move forward, for one, we can laugh about it. Whereas in the situation, obviously, there was nothing funny about it. There is actually nothing funny about it. But obviously, looking back now, we have the capability to talk about it in a different way, to feel about it in a different way. People listen in a different way
Mhm.
than when we talked about it when we were right in the situation, right? And what also happens, and I think that's the most beautiful part of this painful journey,
Mhm.
is that it allows you to really become very authentically yourself. It allows you to hold on to everything you really like about yourself,
Mhm.
while letting go of everything that doesn't serve you any longer. And what happens when we do that is, when we are authentic in ourselves, if our inside is authentic, our outside is authentic, right? Because our life is always a reflection of us. And that's how we then actually find ourselves, despite all of this hardship, leading a really loving, fulfilling life that's so authentic in who we are. And the people that cross our path are so much more aligned with who we are. The work we do is so much more aligned with who we are, rather than what we thought we should be doing. I mean, I was a CPA, right? I was crunching numbers, and I thought I didn't see anything wrong with it, and I would have done that for probably the rest of my life. But then obviously this happened, and now I do what I do now, and this is actually it's so fulfilling, and it's me,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard. I'm not gonna lie. Like, the recovery
Oh
from
yeah.
narcissistic abuse is hard. It's painful. It's lonely,
Yeah.
but it's worth it.
It is definitely worth it. I see one of the challenges that come with that, because some people, when they're raised in certain families, they get so used to the abuse that they think that is
Mm,
something normal. And and this I say from experience, coming from one horrible relationship and getting to a good relationship was the biggest challenge, because what I did, I self-sabotaged,
yes.
right? Because I was thinking to myself, and it took me a long time to get to that, to even want to try it in a relationship, but unfortunately, it didn't work out too well, because I was constantly waiting.
Hmm.
I was constantly waiting for it to come, right?
Yeah.
And so I sabotaged, because I was going, every time that individual would say something, I would look and go, "Ooh, that's cinnamon. Oh, that's real cinnamon. I need to be a little bit more careful with
Yeah.
what I do, right? I just need to keep my mouth shut and just pay attention to everything." And it didn't matter what it was. If I saw that red flag, I was honed in on that red flag, right? And it was as if I forgot that that individual had nothing to do with what was
Yeah.
going on.
It goes
But
from
again,
one extreme to the other, right? Like in the beginning, we see the red flags, but we ignore them just for the sake of being loved, for the sake of belonging, which obviously is a very natural human desire. And then it flips into getting obsessed about the red flags and seeing red flags everywhere, even if they are in there.
Yes. And I don't think that we give people a fair shake because of that, right? The one true blessing that came out of it, I learned how to be with myself.
Yes.
I learned how to, I said, you know what, before I do anything else, because hurt people hurt people. And that was something that I learned, because I didn't realize that I was hurting like that. And but once I did, I said, you know what, I need to take a step back, because it's not fair for me to do that to someone else. And so I did. And for many, many years, I avoided being in any sort of relationship. I just did the work. I did the work, right? And it was some ABCs that I developed that I didn't know that I developed along the ways, right? And I just began to work on those things, as you said, putting tools into the tool belt, right?
Exactly.
I didn't even understand that, not until sometime later, that's what I was doing, right? And I got to a point to where my self-talk changed. I would get up in the morning, I would go to the mirror and go, I love you.
Yeah, I do that.
Right?
Actually. Yeah.
Right? You're amazing, man. Now go out here and show the world who you are, right? And that in turn changed how my relationships with people showed up, right? And people go, man, you're just such a positive individual. I go, oh, thank you. You know, and I would talk to them, right? And no one had an idea if that's what I was doing. I didn't even know either.
Yeah.
And what I find a lot of times in, the trauma part, right? How embedded it was into that narcissistic abuse, and I didn't realize that until a little bit later. And, again, one of those things that was like, oh, holy crap. I am dealing with unresolved trauma here, right?
There's so many light bulb moments on that journey.
Yeah. And I was like, bing, what? No, not me, right? Not, and I think that's what we all say. No, not me. I'm not traumatized. It didn't affect me that way, right? It didn't affect me that way. I thought I was Mr. Billy Badass, but I wasn't, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I got beat up, Ronia. And I was abused. I was like, oh, this is not good. But, I kind of deterred off for a little bit, but go back to what I was saying in the beginning. I think so many people get into family relationships, other relationships, but it all stems from somewhere.
It all stems, and but that's the important thing to realize, right? Because obviously we find ourselves in situations not because it's our fault, but because there is something that for us that actually gets us into this kind of trouble. And that's when we look at the healing from narcissistic abuse as well. It's so multi-layered because you need to deal with what has happened right now, which is like very acute trauma, because obviously when we experience narcissistic abuse, we're in a fight or flight situation, right? And our amygdala is on high alert and is misfiring, and it's a very uncomfortable place to be in because we sense danger even when there is none, because our brain is misfiring. But then there is also what's underneath, and to explore what is it that actually got us into trouble here in the first place, because maybe it is a family dynamic, how we grew up, and certain behaviors, certain ways of being treated were just normal, even though they are not acceptable. It might just be all we know, or some conditioning, programming that maybe served a purpose at one point when we were little, because obviously all we want to do is be loved and survive. But then actually as a grown-up, we take all of this with us. It's how we see the world, how we see relationships, how we interact with people. And it's really about exploring what is this actually all about. At the end of the day, the narcissist is completely irrelevant. All they show us is a door, and we are invited to walk through it. And it's such a fast track to really profound personal development if you take that invitation. And I would like to invite everyone to take that invitation, to really explore, what is this really about for me?
I like that, because it's a more of a self-awareness, and a question that you pose is actually opens up the door for more in-depth growth, right? Because and I followed a process that was unlike, I didn't even know I was doing this process, but I learned. And and I say this so maybe somebody could take this and let me know, you're here. Let me know if this is one of the ways that you can do this. But what I ended up doing, I had a conversation with a guy, and he was telling me about his childhood, and what he had told me sounded so difficult that I had to try it. He said, you know what? When I started healing, I had to take myself through a journey backwards in my life. And I had to be honest with myself at every interval, because the brain will create stories for you to hide the traumatic abuse, because it doesn't want to see you hurt, right? Exactly. But it also holds on to certain things that you carry over with you, depending on how powerful it was. And so when he said this, I went, how in the world do you go backwards in your life? What does that mean? And then I did. I told myself breath work. And then, and this was the crazy part. When I went to sleep, I set my brain and said, I need to figure out where this began for me. And what do I need to do? And so in my dream, I went from the place that I was at, and I began to go back to major intervals within my life. And if I came to a spot which was confusing because there was blurred images, I said, show me the true image of the situation. And it did. And I began to hurt a lot more. Now, I say that to say this, because it's part of the process. That hurt was part of the person that I was back then, and I needed to heal. So when I associated those things, the healing process, I realized that there was going to be a certain amount of pain, a lot of truth that came through there. And once I got to a point and I could sit in that moment right there, I said, who do I need to be in this moment? And then I started to trace it. And it went all the way back, and I got to the point to where I realized where everything changed. What happened? Oh, Tony, at the age of 6. Remember this happened? It did happen.
Yeah.
You could have dealt with it this way, but you did try to do this. Unfortunately, you had to make a decision. Are you okay with that decision? Yes, I am. Okay. Now, the kid that you were back then is still hurt. Who do you need to be for that kid? I need to be his protector. I need to be his comforter. I need to be the person that kid can talk to. But also, I need to be someone that kid can walk with, because that kid has trust issues, right? And so what I did, I became that different version as I began my forward journey.
Yeah.
I became that version of myself, and to become the man that I am today.
Yeah. And what you actually did is you took it out of the cognitive function, right? Because you did all of this, you went to sleep, you were actually working with your unconscious mind. And that's what makes this so powerful. And that's why hypnosis is so beautiful in this kind of work, because that's what allows us to access those kind of states as well. Very similar to when you go to sleep, right? When you're about to drift off, because the chatterbox is switched off. And if you think about it, our conscious mind, right, always wants to figure everything out. It's always like, why? Our unconscious mind already knows why.
Right.
And our unconscious mind is the storehouse of all of our memories, our emotions, our resources. And that's exactly in whatever way you access that. You did breath work, you did it when you went to sleep, I use hypnosis. However you access this state of consciousness, that's the level where the healing actually needs to happen. Because when we make changes on that level, we're not forcing ourselves to behave differently. It just is different after that. And I think one thing that I want to touch on that you mentioned was the pain in the process when you connected with the little you. And there are two things to that. So first of all, and I already mentioned it, we all do the best we can with what we have at any given point in time. Now, when we have experiences as children, as children, for one, we are sponges, right? We take everything as is and it goes straight in. So when we then actually deal with adverse situations, challenging situations, and they don't have to be like massive traumatic situations, like sometimes it can literally be something that someone said. And at the end of the day, what trauma is any kind of event that we don't have the emotional resources to deal with at the time. And when we are children, obviously, what is available to us is much less than what we have as an adult. And that's why it's really important to connect with our little selves and be there for them. And that's what we then can bring back into today. I hope that made sense now. Are you still there, Tony? Are we still streaming? I don't know. Can someone let me know whether we're still live? Huh. I can continue talking if you're still listening to me, but I don't know if you are. Let's see. I'm just checking on YouTube. So if I can find the live stream so I can see if we're actually still there. All right. Still there. Oh, so we're still there. You can see me on YouTube still. Okay. So I'm not quite sure where Tony went. I think the best thing to do probably is to restart the stream. So that's what I'm going to do. So please bear with us the joy of being live, right? Thank you so much for your patience. I'm going to hang up and we're going to restart the live stream. Yeah? Okay. See you in just a little bit.